Lisa wiped down the marble table for the third time, making sure every water spot was gone. The lunch rush at Romano's was finally over, but she knew the real work was just beginning. The dinner crowd would start arriving in 2 hours, and she needed every table to be perfect. Tips from the evening shift would determine whether she could pay the electricity bill this month, or have to choose between that and groceries again. She tucked a loose strand of brown hair behind her ear and felt the familiar weight of her grandmother's pendant against her chest. The silver chain was old and had turned slightly dull over the years, but the pendant itself still caught the light beautifully. It was about the size of a quarter, with an intricate design that looked like intertwined vines forming a circle. In the center sat a small green stone that her grandmother had always insisted was a real emerald, though Lisa had never bothered to find out if that was true. "Table 12 is getting impatient," called Jenny from behind the bar. They'd been waiting for their bread for 10 minutes. Lisa grabbed the basket of warm rolls and hurried over to the corner booth where a couple sat scrolling through their phones. The woman barely looked up when Lisa set down the bread, but the man gave her a polite smile and thanked her. These were the kind of customers she appreciated, the ones who remembered that she was a person, not just part of the restaurant furniture. By 6 o'clock, Romano's had transformed. The lights were dimmed, candles flickered on every table, and the evening crowd began filtering in. Lisa had changed into her black dress, the one she saved for dinner shifts because it looked more professional than her lunch uniform. She checked her reflection in the bathroom mirror and adjusted the pendant so it sat properly above the neckline. "You've got the VIP section tonight," Manager Tom told her as she clocked in. "Big business dinner in booth 7. These guys order expensive wine and tip well if you take care of them." Lisa nodded and grabbed her notepad. VIP section meant pressure, but it also meant better tips. Her 8-year-old daughter Sophie had been asking for new art supplies for weeks, and Lisa had been putting her off. Maybe tonight would be the night she could finally say yes. The hostess led a group of 4 men in expensive suits to booth 7. Lisa waited a few minutes to let them settle in before approaching with water glasses and menus. The man sitting on the left side of the booth, clearly the leader of the group, was talking animatedly about market projections and quarterly growth. He had graying hair at his temples but looked younger than his probable 50-something years. His suit probably cost more than Lisa made in 3 months. "Good evening, gentlemen," Lisa said with her practiced smile. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" The business leader looked up to respond, and Lisa watched his face change completely. His confident expression melted away, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He was staring directly at her chest, and for a moment Lisa worried that her dress was inappropriate, or that she had spilled something on herself. "Sir," she asked gently, "would you like to hear about our wine selection?" The man, David, she heard one of his colleagues call him, seemed to snap back to reality. Yes, wine. We'll need wine." His voice sounded shaky, completely different from the confident tone he'd been using moments before. One of the other men, a younger guy with blonde hair, jumped in. "We'll take a bottle of your best Cabernet. And could we get some appetizers? Maybe the calamari and those fancy cheese things?" Lisa wrote down the order, stealing glances at David. He was still staring at her, but now his eyes kept moving between her face and her pendant. His hands were actually trembling as he reached for his water glass. "I'll get that wine right out to you," Lisa said, backing away from the table. Something was definitely wrong with this guy, and she hoped he wasn't having some kind of medical emergency. In the kitchen, she told Jenny about the strange interaction. "Maybe he's just nervous about his business meeting," Jenny suggested. "Rich guys get weird when there's money on the line." But when Lisa returned with the wine, David's behavior got even stranger. He watched her every movement as she opened the bottle and poured small tastes for approval. When she leaned over to pour his glass, she noticed he was holding his breath. The moment she stepped back, he exhaled like he'd been underwater. "Is everything all right, sir?" Lisa asked. She'd been waitressing for 6 years and had dealt with all kinds of customers, but this felt different. He wasn't being creepy or inappropriate. He seemed genuinely shaken by something. "The pendant," David whispered, so quietly that his business partners couldn't hear. "Where did you get that pendant?" Lisa's hand instinctively moved to her throat. "It was my grandmother's. She passed away a few years ago." David's face went even paler. "What was her name?" "Your grandmother?" Now Lisa was getting uncomfortable. This was definitely not normal customer behavior. "I'm sorry, but I should let you gentlemen get back to your meeting. I'll check on you in a few minutes." She hurried away, but she could feel David's eyes following her across the restaurant. Every time she glanced over at booth 7, he was watching her. His colleagues seemed frustrated with his lack of attention to their presentation, but he kept losing focus whenever Lisa came into view. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of mixed emotions. Lisa tried to focus on her other tables, but she found herself thinking about David's reaction to her pendant. The way he'd said, "Where did you get that pendant?" It wasn't casual curiosity. There was recognition in his voice, maybe even pain. During her break, she stepped outside and called her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who watched Sophie in the evenings. "How's my girl doing?" Lisa asked. "She's fine, mija. Working on a drawing for you. She said it's a surprise." Lisa smiled for the first time in hours. Sophie's drawings always made everything better. "Tell her mommy will be home soon." When she went back inside, she noticed David's group was getting ready to leave. The business meeting seemed to have ended awkwardly. The other men looked frustrated while David appeared distracted and distant. As they stood up from the booth, David pulled out his wallet and left what looked like a very generous tip on the table. But instead of leaving with his colleagues, David lingered. He pretended to check his phone while the other men walked toward the exit. Lisa was clearing another table when she noticed him approaching her. "Miss," he said quietly, "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable earlier. It's just that pendant. It's very unique. I've only seen one like it before many years ago." Lisa studied his face. He looked tired now, and sat in a way that seemed to go deeper than just a bad business meeting. "It's been in my family for a long time," she said carefully. David nodded slowly. "Would you mind if I asked, what was your grandmother's full name?" Every instinct told Lisa not to answer personal questions from customers, but something in David's expression made her hesitate. He wasn't asking out of idle curiosity or for any reason that felt threatening. He looked like a man searching for something he'd lost long ago. "Elena," she said finally. "Elena Santos." David closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, they were filled with tears he was clearly trying to hold back. "Thank you," he whispered, and walked away without another word. Lisa stood frozen by the empty table, holding a stack of dirty plates and wondering what had just happened. She looked down at her grandmother's pendant. The same pendant she'd worn every day for years without thinking much about it. Suddenly it felt heavier, like it was carrying secrets she didn't understand. Outside the restaurant window, she could see David standing on the sidewalk, his phone pressed to his ear. Even from this distance, she could tell he was having an intense conversation with whoever was on the other end. Lisa finished clearing the table and tried to push the strange encounter out of her mind. She had 4 more hours of work ahead of her, and she couldn't afford to be distracted. But as she went through the motions of serving other customers, she kept thinking about the way David had said her grandmother's name. Like he'd known her. David couldn't sleep. He'd been lying in his king-sized bed for 3 hours, staring at the ceiling and thinking about that pendant. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elena's face from 25 years ago. She'd been wearing that exact same pendant the last time he saw her, standing in the doorway of her tiny apartment with tears streaming down her cheeks. At 4 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and walked to his home office. The city lights twinkled below his penthouse windows, but David barely noticed them. He sat down at his desk and opened his laptop, then immediately closed it again. What was he supposed to search for? Woman who looks like my dead girlfriend? Mysterious pendant sightings? He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for Peterson Investigations. Jack Peterson had helped him with corporate security issues before, but this was different. This was personal. "I need you to find out everything you can about someone," David said when Jack answered, despite the early hour. "Good morning to you too, David. Must be important if you're calling at dawn." "Her name is Lisa. She works as a waitress at Romano's downtown. I need to know about her family, especially her grandmother, Elena Santos." There was a pause. "This isn't about business, is it?" "No, it's not." "Okay, give me what details you have, and I'll see what I can dig up." David spent the next hour telling Jack everything he could remember about the waitress, about Elena, and about the pendant that had turned his world upside down in a matter of seconds. Jack listened without judgment, which was one of the reasons David had used his services for years. "I'll have something for you by tomorrow evening," Jack said. Maybe sooner. The next day dragged by. David tried to focus on meetings and phone calls, but his mind kept wandering. His assistant Rebecca noticed his distraction during a conference call with investors from Tokyo. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked after the call ended. "You seemed a million miles away." "Just tired," David lied. "I think I'll head out early today." But instead of going home, David found himself driving downtown. He parked across the street from Romano's and sat in his car feeling ridiculous. What was he doing? Stalking a waitress because she wore a pendant that reminded him of his college girlfriend? Through the restaurant windows, he could see Lisa moving between tables with practiced efficiency. She was good at her job, friendly with customers, quick with orders, always seeming to anticipate what people needed. David wondered what Elena would think of the young woman who might be her granddaughter. Would she be proud? His phone buzzed with a text from Jack. "Found some interesting stuff. Can you meet tonight?" David's heart raced as he typed back, "Yes, my office. 8 o'clock. The hours until 8 felt like days. David couldn't concentrate on anything. He ordered takeout but barely touched it. He tried watching the news but couldn't follow any of the stories. All he could think about was what Jack might have discovered. When Jack arrived at David's office, he carried a thick folder and wore the expression of someone who'd uncovered something significant. "You're going to want to sit down for this," Jack said, settling into the chair across from David's desk. "Just tell me." Lisa Martinez, 28 years old, single mother to an 8-year-old daughter named Sophie. She's been working at Romano's for 3 years. Before that, she was at a diner across town. High school graduate. Took some community college classes, but never finished. Clean record. No debts except normal stuff like rent and utilities. David nodded impatiently. "What about her grandmother?" Jack opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. Elena Santos Nevesquez. Born in 1952, died 5 years ago from cancer. She raised Lisa from the age of 2 after Lisa's mother died in a car accident. David's breath caught. Vasquez. Elena Vasquez was the name of the girl he'd loved in college, the girl who'd disappeared from his life without explanation 26 years ago. "There's more," Jack continued. "Elena never married, never had any children of her own, according to official records, but she was listed as Lisa's guardian from the time Lisa was a toddler. So Lisa's mother was Elena's daughter." Jack shook his head. "That's where it gets interesting. Lisa's birth certificate lists her mother as Carmen Martinez, but there's no record of Carmen being related to Elena. And here's the really strange part. Elena moved to the coast right around the time Carmen died, specifically to take custody of Lisa. She had no prior connection to the Martinez family that I could find." David felt like the room was spinning. "Show me everything you have on Elena." Jack spread out documents across the desk. David's hand shook as he picked up Elena's photograph. It was clearly taken years after he'd known her, but it was definitely the same person. The same dark eyes, the same gentle smile, the same face he'd fallen in love with when they were both poor college students working multiple jobs to pay for school. According to neighbors in the coastal town where Elena lived, she never talked about Lisa's real father. Jack continued. She just said he was a good man who didn't know about Lisa, and that someday they might find each other. "What do you mean, didn't know about Lisa?" Jack leaned forward. "David, I think you need to consider the possibility that Lisa isn't Elena's granddaughter. Based on the timeline and the circumstances, I think Lisa might be Elena's daughter." "Your daughter?" The words hit David like a physical blow. He stood up quickly, knocking over his coffee cup. The hot liquid spread across the desk, soaking into the documents, but David barely noticed. "That's impossible. Helena would have told me if she was pregnant." "Would she? You said your family disapproved of her. You said there was pressure from your parents to focus on your career, instead of getting serious with a girl from a different background." David remembered those fights with his parents. The threats to cut off his college funding if he didn't stop wasting time with Elena. The constant reminders that he was destined for bigger things than dating a scholarship. Student who worked in the campus cafeteria. "She tried to call me," David whispered, more to himself than to Jack. "Right before she disappeared. She left messages saying she needed to talk to me about something important, but I was so angry about the fight we'd had about my parents interfering. I never called her back." "What kind of fight?" "She said she thought we should take a break. Give each other space to focus on school." I thought she was breaking up with me because of what my parents had said to her. I was hurt and stubborn, so I decided if she wanted space, I'd give her all the space in the world. Jack gathered up the wet documents. When was the last time you saw her? March 15th, 1999. I remember because it was the day before spring break. I came back after the break expecting to patch things up, but she was gone. Dropped out of school, moved out of her apartment. No forwarding address, no way to contact her. Lisa was born in December 1999, 9 months after March. David sank back into his chair. The math was simple, but the implications were overwhelming. For 28 years, he'd had a daughter he didn't know existed. Elena had carried that secret until the day she died, raising his child alone rather than reaching out to the man who'd been too proud and too hurt to return her phone calls. "There's something else," Jack said gently. "I did some digging into Elena's financial records from that time period. She received a lump sum payment in late 1999, about a month after Lisa was born. $5,000 deposited directly into her bank account. From who? Your father's law firm." The room went completely silent. David stared at Jack, trying to process what he'd just heard. His father had known. His father had found Elena, had probably threatened her or paid her to disappear. The man who'd spent David's entire childhood preaching about family values and responsibility had denied his own grandchild the chance to know her father. "I need to see Lisa again," David said finally. "Are you going to tell her who you are?" David looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, his daughter was probably putting her own daughter to bed, working 2 jobs to make ends meet while he lived in luxury she couldn't imagine. Elena had protected Lisa from the chaos of David's family, but she was gone now. Lisa was struggling alone, wearing the pendant that was supposed to lead her back to him. "I don't know," David admitted, "but I can't just walk away. Not again." Over the next week, David found himself at Romano's almost every day. He told himself he was just trying to figure out the best way to approach Lisa. But really, he was trying to get to know his daughter from a distance. He watched her interact with customers, noticed how she always checked on the elderly diners twice to make sure they had everything they needed. He saw her patience with difficult customers and her genuine smile when children came into the restaurant. Lisa, for her part, was starting to notice the strange businessman who kept showing up. She mentioned it to Jenny during one of their breaks. "That guy from the business dinner last week keeps coming back. Always sits in my section, always orders the same thing. It's getting kind of weird." "Maybe he has a crush on you," Jenny suggested. Lisa shook her head. "It's not like that. He barely talks to me, and when he does, he seems nervous. Plus, he stares at my necklace every time I walk by his table." What Lisa didn't know was that every time David saw the pendant, he was remembering Elena, the way she used to touch it when she was thinking, the way it caught the light when she laughed, the way it had rested against her collarbone the last time he held her. David was building up the courage to have a real conversation with Lisa, but he had no idea how to begin. How do you tell someone that you think you might be their father? How do you explain 28 years of absence? How do you apologize for not being there? He was about to find out. Lisa was wiping down tables when she noticed the businessman sitting in the corner booth again. This was the 4th time this week he'd come in, and it was starting to make her uncomfortable. He always ordered the same thing, coffee and a slice of apple pie, and he always left a $20 tip for a $7 check. But what bothered her most was the way he kept staring at her pendant. She was about to take her break when she saw him stand up and walk toward the counter where she was restocking napkins. Her heart started beating faster. Something about his expression looked different today, more determined, maybe even desperate. "Excuse me, miss," he said quietly. "I know this might sound strange, but could I talk to you for a few minutes?" "It's about your pendant." Lisa's hand instinctively moved to her throat. "I'm sorry, but I'm working. Maybe you could speak to my manager if you have a complaint about the service." No complaint. David ran his hand through his hair, clearly struggling with what to say. "My name is David Chen. That pendant you're wearing, I gave one exactly like it to someone very special many years ago." Lisa stared at him. "That's impossible. This was my grandmother's." "What was your grandmother's name?" The question felt too personal, too invasive. Lisa looked around the restaurant, making sure other people were nearby. "Why do you want to know?" David pulled out his wallet and showed her an old photograph that was creased and faded from years of being carried around. Because I think your grandmother was the woman I loved more than anything in the world. And I've been looking for her for 28 years. Despite her instincts telling her to walk away, Lisa found herself looking at the photograph. It showed a young couple on what looked like a college campus. The girl was beautiful with dark hair and a bright smile. Around her neck was a pendant that looked exactly like the one Lisa wore every day. That's Grandma Elena, Lisa whispered. But she was so young here. We both were. I was 22, she was 21. We were students at the state university. David's voice got softer as he looked at the photo. I was studying business, she was majoring in education. She wanted to be a teacher. Lisa felt dizzy. Her grandmother had never talked much about her past, especially not about any boyfriends from college. This doesn't make sense. If you knew my grandmother, why didn't you ever contact her? She died 5 years ago. The pain that crossed David's face was genuine and heartbreaking. I didn't know where she was. She disappeared without telling me, right before spring break in our senior year. I tried to find her, but it was like she vanished. People don't just vanish, she did. And I thought maybe she decided she didn't want to be with me anymore. My family had money, hers didn't. There was pressure from my parents to end the relationship. We had a fight about it, and then she was gone. Lisa's manager, Tom, walked by and gave her a look that meant she needed to get back to work. I can't talk about this now. I have customers waiting. When do you get off work? Please, I know this is crazy, but I need to know about Elena. I need to know what happened to her. Against her better judgment, Lisa found herself saying, I take my break in an hour. We can talk for 15 minutes, but that's it. The next hour felt like the longest of Lisa's life. She kept glancing over at David, who sat in his corner booth nursing the same cup of coffee and staring out the window. When break time finally came, she grabbed her purse and met him by the back exit of the restaurant. They sat on a bench in the small parking lot behind Romano's. David was holding the old photograph, and Lisa could see his hands shaking slightly. Tell me about Elena, he said. What was she like when you knew her? Grandma Elena was the kindest person I ever met, Lisa said carefully. She raised me from the time I was 2 years old. My mother died in a car accident, and Elena took me in even though we weren't blood relatives. David looked confused. What do you mean, not blood relatives? I mean, she wasn't actually my grandmother. She was my mother's friend, I think. But she loved me like I was her own granddaughter, so that's what I called her. What was your mother's name? Carmen Martinez. She was only 19 when she died. David was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Lisa, what's your last name? Martinez. Lisa Martinez. And when were you born? December 15th, 1999. Why does that matter? David's face went completely white. He stared at Lisa with an expression she couldn't read. Part shock, part recognition, part something that looked like grief. Lisa, he said very slowly. I don't think Elena was your grandmother at all. I think Elena was your mother. That's ridiculous. My mother was Carmen Martinez, and she died when I was 2. What if Carmen Martinez never existed? What if Elena created that identity to protect you? Lisa stood up from the bench, suddenly angry. You're crazy. You show up at my work, bothering me with wild stories about my family. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm done. Wait, please. David stood up too, his voice urgent. The timeline fits, Lisa. Elena disappeared in March 1999. You were born in December 1999. That's 9 months. So what? That doesn't prove anything. David pulled out his phone and showed her another photo. This one more recent, showing Elena as an older woman. It was clearly the same person from the college photo, just decades later. This is your grandmother, right? The woman who raised you? Lisa's anger faded as she looked at the photo. Where did you get this? I hired someone to find information about you. About Elena. Lisa, I think the reason Elena left school so suddenly was because she was pregnant. I think she was pregnant with you. The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. She sat back down on the bench, her legs suddenly weak. No, that can't be right. She would have told me, would she? If she thought it was better for you not to know? If she was protecting you from something? Lisa's mind was racing. She thought about all the times she'd asked Elena about her parents, about her family history. Elena had always been vague, always changed the subject. She'd said Lisa's father was a good man who couldn't be part of their lives, but never explained why. Even if that were true, Lisa said quietly, it doesn't mean anything to you. You could have been one of many boyfriends she had in college. David sat down beside her on the bench. Lisa, look at me. Really look at me. She turned to face him, and for the first time she studied his features instead of just seeing him as a customer. He had dark hair like hers, though his was graying at the temples. His eyes were brown, like hers. His nose had the same slight curve that she saw in the mirror every day. Oh my God, she whispered. I think Elena left because my family threatened her somehow. My father was powerful, had connections. If he wanted to make someone disappear, he could do it. And I think Elena knew that if she told me about you, it would destroy both our lives. Lisa's hands were shaking now. You think you're my father? I think there's a very good chance I am. The pendant was my gift to her. She kept it all these years, and now you wear it. Maybe that was her way of making sure that someday, somehow, we'd find each other. Tears started rolling down Lisa's cheeks. She used to touch this pendant when she was sad. She'd get this faraway look in her eyes, and she'd just sit there holding it. I always wondered what she was thinking about. She was thinking about me, about us, about the life we could have had together. But why didn't she ever try to contact you after she left school? If you were my father, why didn't she tell you? David's voice cracked. Because I was stupid and proud and young. She tried to call me before she left. Left messages saying she needed to talk about something important. But I was angry about our fight, so I never called her back. By the time I tried to reach her, she was gone. Lisa covered her face with her hands. This is too much. I can't process this. I know it's overwhelming. But Lisa, if I'm right about this, it means you're not alone anymore. It means you have family. I have Sophie, my daughter. She's the only family I need. Sophie is my granddaughter, David said softly, and she deserves to know her grandfather. She deserves to have opportunities that I can provide. Lisa looked up at him, anger flashing in her eyes. We don't need your money. We're doing fine on our own. Are you? Working double shifts, living paycheck to paycheck, wearing a uniform that's been mended too many times to count? That's not living, Lisa, that's surviving. It's honest work. I'm not saying it isn't, I'm saying Elena worked just as hard when she was raising you. And maybe it's time someone took care of you for a change. Lisa stood up again, pacing in the small parking lot. Even if everything you're saying is true, even if you are my father, where have you been for 28 years? Why should I trust you now? Because I didn't know, David said simply. If I had known about you, nothing would have kept me away. Not my family, not my career, nothing. I would have fought for Elena, and I would have fought for you. But you didn't know because you were too proud to return her phone calls. You're right. That's a mistake I'll regret for the rest of my life. But I can't change the past, Lisa. All I can do is try to make the future better. Lisa stopped pacing and looked at him. This man who might be her father. This stranger who had turned her world upside down in the span of an hour. I need time to think about this. I need to go home to Sophie and figure out what this all means. Of course. But Lisa, there's something else you should know. I have another daughter, Victoria. She's 24, and she doesn't know about you yet. Great. So I'm the illegitimate daughter who's going to ruin her perfect life. You're my daughter, David said firmly. And if Victoria has a problem with that, it's her problem to deal with, not yours. Lisa's break was almost over. She could see Tom looking for her through the restaurant windows. I have to get back to work. Can I see you again? Tomorrow, maybe? We could do a DNA test to be sure. Lisa touched her pendant, the same pendant that Elena had worn in that faded photograph. I don't need a DNA test. Looking at you now, seeing that picture of Grandma Elena when she was young, I already know the answer. David's eyes filled with tears. Lisa, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you were growing up. I'm sorry Elena had to raise you alone. I'm sorry you've had to struggle so hard. Don't apologize for things that weren't your fault, Lisa said quietly. Elena made her choices for her own reasons. But now I have to make mine. She walked toward the restaurant, then turned back. David, do you really think she loved you all those years? I know she did. Just like I never stopped loving her. Lisa nodded and went back inside, leaving David standing alone in the parking lot, holding a photograph of the woman he'd lost and wondering if he'd just found his daughter or lost her too. David sat in his car outside Victoria's apartment building for 20 minutes, trying to figure out how to tell his daughter that she had a sister she'd never known about. He'd practiced the conversation in his head a dozen times, but every version sounded wrong. How do you explain 28 years of secrets? How do you tell someone their entire understanding of their family is about to change? Victoria lived in a luxury high-rise downtown, in an apartment he'd bought for her when she graduated from college 2 years ago. She worked at an art gallery, not because she needed the money, but because she said she wanted to do something meaningful with her life. David had never understood what she meant by that until now. He finally gathered the courage to go upstairs. Victoria answered the door wearing paint-stained jeans and an oversized sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked so young, so innocent. David's heart ached thinking about how this conversation was going to change everything for her. "Dad, what are you doing here? We don't have dinner planned until Sunday. I need to talk to you about something important. Can I come in?" Victoria stepped aside and David walked into her apartment. It was decorated with artwork from local artists, books scattered everywhere, and plants in every corner. So different from his sterile penthouse. Victoria had always been more warm and creative than him, more like Elena in ways he was only now beginning to understand. "You look terrible," Victoria said, studying his face. "When's the last time you slept?" "Vic, sit down, please." She curled up on her couch, tucking her feet under her. "You're scaring me. Are you sick? Is it the company?" "It's about your family. About my past. What about it?" David sat down across from her, wishing he'd brought the old photograph of Elena. "Before I met your mother, I was in love with someone else. A girl named Elena. We were in college together." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Okay. Most people date other people before they get married. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Elena disappeared from my life suddenly and I never knew why. I found out recently that she was pregnant when she left. With my child." The color drained from Victoria's face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you have a sister. A half-sister. Her name is Lisa and she's 28 years old." Victoria stared at him for a long moment, then started laughing. But it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of bitter laugh people make when they can't believe what they're hearing. "A sister? Are you kidding me right now?" "I know it's a shock." "A shock?" Victoria stood up, pacing around the small living room. "Dad, this is insane. You had an affair while you were married to Mom?" "No, it wasn't like that. Elena disappeared before I ever met your mother. I thought she was gone forever. I didn't know about Lisa until this week." "How did you find out?" David explained about the restaurant, about the pendant, about hiring the investigator. With every detail, Victoria's expression grew more disbelieving. "So let me get this straight," she said when he finished. "You've been obsessing over some waitress because she wears a necklace that reminds you of your college girlfriend?" "She's not just some waitress, Victoria. She's your sister. She's a stranger. You don't even know for sure if she's really your daughter." "I know." "How can you know? Did you do a DNA test?" David shook his head. "I don't need one. She looks like Elena. She has Elena's mannerisms, and the timing fits perfectly." Victoria stopped pacing and faced him. "Even if she is your daughter, that doesn't make her my sister. I've lived my entire life as your only child. I'm not going to pretend that some random person is suddenly part of our family just because you feel guilty about your past." "Victoria, that's not fair." "Fair? What's not fair is finding out at 24 that my father has been lying to me my whole life. What's not fair is discovering that you had another daughter out there while I was growing up, feeling like I could never live up to your expectations." David felt like he'd been punched. "What do you mean, never live up to my expectations? Come on, Dad. You think I don't know how disappointed you are in me? I don't work in business like you wanted. I don't have a family yet. I don't even have a serious boyfriend. And now I find out there's this other daughter who's actually had real struggles, real problems to overcome. She's probably everything you wished I could be." "That's not true, isn't it? She's a single mother working multiple jobs to support her kid. She's had to fight for everything she has. Meanwhile, I've been handed everything on a silver platter and I'm still just drifting through life without any real purpose." David sat down heavily on the couch. "Victoria, you are not a disappointment to me. You never have been. Then why do you always seem so distant? Why do you always look at me like you're waiting for me to become someone else?" The question hit David harder than anything Victoria had said so far. Because she was right. He had been distant, had been waiting for her to show more drive, more ambition. But now he realized it wasn't disappointment he'd been feeling, it was fear. Fear that she'd inherited his capacity for selfishness, for putting career above family. "I was trying to protect you," he said quietly. "I was trying not to make the same mistakes with you that I made with Elena." "What mistakes?" "I chose my family's expectations over love. I chose success over happiness. I was so afraid you'd make the same choices that I forgot to show you there were other options. Victoria sat back down, her anger deflating into something that looked more like sadness. Dad, I've spent my whole life trying to figure out who I'm supposed to be. Maybe meeting this sister could help me understand that. You want to meet her? I don't know, maybe. What's she like? David thought about Lisa, her determination, her kindness to difficult customers, her obvious love for her daughter. She's strong, stronger than she probably knows. She's been raising an 8-year-old daughter on her own, working 2 jobs, and she's never complained about any of it. She has Elena's warmth, but she's tougher than Elena ever was. What about her daughter? My niece, I guess, Sophie. I haven't met her yet, but Lisa lights up when she talks about her. She's clearly the most important thing in Lisa's world. Victoria was quiet for several minutes, processing everything. Finally, she said, I want to meet them. But not because I'm ready to accept them as family. I need to see for myself. Are you sure? No, but I need to understand who this person is, and why she's suddenly so important to you. David arranged to meet Lisa at a coffee shop the next evening. He'd asked her to bring Sophie, thinking it might be easier for Victoria if she met them both at once. Lisa had been hesitant. She was still processing everything herself, but she'd agreed. Victoria arrived first and sat in a corner booth, nervously checking her phone every few seconds. She'd changed clothes 3 times before leaving her apartment, finally settling on jeans and a simple sweater. She didn't want to look too fancy, but she also didn't want to look like she wasn't taking this seriously. When Lisa walked in holding Sophie's hand, Victoria's breath caught. Even from across the coffee shop, the family resemblance was obvious. Lisa had the same dark eyes as David, the same determined set to her jaw. But there was something else, something in the way she moved and smiled that reminded Victoria of photos she'd seen of her grandmother. Sophie was a beautiful little girl with curly hair and curious eyes. She was carrying a small backpack and looking around the coffee shop with the wonder of a child who didn't get to go to fancy places very often. Victoria watched as David stood up to greet them. The interaction was still awkward. Lisa shook his hand formally and Sophie hid behind her mother's legs. But there was something in David's expression that Victoria had never seen before. He looked at Lisa and Sophie the way other fathers looked at their children, with pride and protectiveness and unconditional love. It was the way Victoria had always wished he would look at her. When David brought Lisa and Sophie over to the table, Victoria forced herself to smile. Hi, I'm Victoria. Lisa, and this is Sophie. Sophie peeked out from behind her mother and waved shyly. Are you my grandfather's other daughter? The simple question from an 8-year-old somehow cut through all the tension and awkwardness. Victoria found herself smiling genuinely for the first time all day. I guess I am. Does that make me your aunt? Sophie considered this seriously. I've never had an aunt before. Do aunts give presents? Sophie. Lisa scolded, but Victoria laughed. Sometimes they do, especially to nieces who are brave enough to meet their new family. As they sat and talked, Victoria found herself watching Lisa carefully. She noticed how Lisa made sure Sophie had enough to eat before touching her own coffee. How she listened patiently when Sophie interrupted with random observations about the coffee shop's decorations. How she quietly corrected Sophie's manners without making her feel bad. Lisa was everything Victoria had expected and nothing like she'd feared. She wasn't trying to impress anyone or claim her place in the family. She was just being herself, a good mother, a hard worker, someone who'd learned to be strong because she'd never had any other choice. Lisa, Victoria said during a lull in the conversation, I owe you an apology. When Dad first told me about you, I was angry. I felt like you were going to change everything about our family. Maybe I will, Lisa said honestly. I don't know how this is supposed to work either. But watching you with Sophie, seeing how Dad looks at both of you, I think maybe our family needed changing. Lisa looked surprised. What do you mean? Victoria glanced at David, then back at Lisa. I've spent my whole life feeling like I wasn't enough for him. Like I was missing some piece that would make me the daughter he really wanted. But looking at you, I think I know what that piece was. I don't understand. You're real, Lisa. You've lived in the real world, faced real problems, made real sacrifices. I've been floating around in this bubble of privilege, and I think Dad was waiting for me to pop it and become someone substantial. David started to protest. But Victoria held up her hand. It's okay, Dad, I'm not angry about it anymore. Actually, I'm grateful. Grateful. Victoria turned to Lisa. Would you mind if I spent some time with you and Sophie? Not because I feel sorry for you or anything like that, but because I think you could teach me things about being strong and being real that I've never learned. Lisa looked confused. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. I'm asking if you'd let me be your sister. Really be your sister. Not just in name, but in the way that matters. For the first time since this whole thing started, Lisa smiled. Really smiled. I'd like that. Sophie would too. She's always wanted a big family. Sophie, who had been coloring on napkins, looked up. Does this mean I get to have a grandfather and an aunt now? If you want them, Lisa said. Sophie considered this with 8-year-old seriousness. Do they know how to play games? Victoria grinned. I'm pretty good at board games. And your grandfather here used to build the most amazing blanket forts when I was little. David looked at Victoria in surprise. You remember that? I remember everything good you ever did, Dad. I just wish there had been more of it. As they sat in that coffee shop, 4 people who had been strangers that morning began to feel like something that might eventually become a family. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But for the first time in years, David felt like he might finally have a chance to do fatherhood right. 3 months after that first coffee shop meeting, Lisa was standing in the kitchen of David's penthouse, watching Sophie chase Victoria around the living room. The sound of their laughter filled the enormous space, making it feel like a home for the first time in years. I still can't believe this is real, Lisa said to David, who was attempting to make pancakes from scratch. He'd been trying to learn how to cook basic meals ever since Sophie mentioned she'd never had homemade pancakes before. Neither can I, David admitted, flipping a pancake that was definitely more crispy than fluffy. I spent so many years thinking I'd lost my chance to be a real father. Now I get to be a grandfather too. Lisa smiled, watching through the window as Victoria taught Sophie how to identify different birds at the feeder they'd installed on the balcony. Victoria had surprised everyone by suggesting that Lisa and Sophie move into the penthouse temporarily. Just until you figure out your next steps, she'd said. But Lisa knew it was really because Victoria craved the family atmosphere as much as they did. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, but it was working better than anyone had expected. Victoria had taken a leave of absence from the art gallery to help with the transition. She drove Sophie to school every morning, helped with homework every afternoon, and had already planned out a summer full of activities they'd never been able to afford before. Lisa, David said, setting down his spatula, I've been thinking about something, and I want to run it by you before I mention it to the others. What is it? I want to start a foundation, in Elena's name, to help single mothers who are trying to get an education or start a career. Women who are in the same situation you are in. Lisa felt tears prick her eyes. David, that's beautiful. But you don't have to do that for me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Elena. She spent her whole life taking care of you when it should have been my job too. This is my way of honoring that sacrifice. What would the foundation do exactly? Provide scholarships, childcare assistance, job training. Whatever women need to build better lives for themselves and their children. I was thinking you could help run it if you're interested. Lisa stared at him. You want me to help run a foundation? David, I never even finished community college, so finish it. The foundation can wait a year or 2 while you get your degree. Victoria's been talking about wanting to do something more meaningful with her life anyway. She could help set everything up while you're in school. Before Lisa could respond, Sophie came running into the kitchen with Victoria close behind her. Mom, Victoria says we can go to the zoo today, and the science museum, and maybe get ice cream after. Lisa laughed. That's 3 different places, sweetheart. We can't do everything in one day. Why not? Victoria asked, grinning. We've got time, and I've got a new car with excellent air conditioning. David watched this interaction with a warmth in his chest he'd never experienced before. This was what he'd been missing all these years, the chaos and joy of a real family. Victoria had bloomed in the last 3 months, becoming more confident and purposeful than he'd ever seen her. And Sophie had brought out a playful side in all of them that David hadn't known existed. Actually, David said, before we go anywhere today, I have something I want to give back to Lisa. He disappeared into his office and returned with a small jewelry box. Lisa's heart started beating faster when she recognized it. Is that? I had it professionally cleaned and restored. The jeweler confirmed that the stone really is an emerald, just like Elena always said. David opened the box to reveal Lisa's pendant, but it looked completely different now. The silver chain gleamed like new, and the emerald in the center sparkled with a brilliance Lisa had never seen before. The intricate design was more beautiful than ever, every tiny detail now visible. "I can't take this," Lisa whispered. "You've already done so much for us. This was never mine to keep. Elena meant for you to have it, and now it's time for it to come home where it belongs." Sophie climbed onto a chair to get a better look. "It's so pretty. Is that the magic necklace that brought us our new family?" "It's not magic, sweetheart," Lisa said. But then she paused. Maybe it was magic, in its own way. The pendant had led David to her, had sparked the conversation that changed all their lives. David lifted the pendant from the box. "May I?" Lisa nodded, lifting her hair so he could fasten the chain around her neck. His hands were gentle, careful, and for a moment she could imagine Elena standing in this same spot years ago, receiving this gift for the first time. "Elena would be so proud of the woman you've become," David said softly, "and so proud of the mother you are to Sophie." "Do you really think so?" "I know so. You have her strength, her kindness, her ability to make everyone around you feel loved. But you also have something Elena never had. You have family who will support you no matter what." Victoria watched this exchange with tears in her eyes. She'd spent years feeling like an outsider in her own family, but now she finally understood what belonging felt like. Lisa and Sophie had given her purpose, had shown her how to love without conditions or expectations. "You know what?" Victoria said suddenly. "I think we should have a proper celebration, not just going to the zoo. I mean a real party, to celebrate our family being complete." "What kind of party?" Sophie asked, her eyes lighting up. "A family reunion party. We'll invite all the neighbors, order way too much food, and tell everyone the story of how Grandpa Elena's pendant brought us all together." Lisa laughed. "Grandpa Elena?" "That's what Sophie calls her now. She says Elena is watching over all of us like a grandpa would." David felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I think Elena would like that title." Over the next few weeks they planned the celebration together. Victoria handled the invitations, and decorations David arranged for catering from Romano's, a touch that made everyone smile. And Lisa worked with Sophie to create a photo display showing Elena at different stages of her life. The evening of the party, the penthouse was filled with neighbors, friends from Sophie's school and colleagues from Victoria's gallery. The apartment buzzed with conversation and laughter, but the most special moment came when David asked for everyone's attention. "I want to tell you all a story," he began, "about a woman named Elena who changed my life twice, once when I was young and foolish, and again recently when her granddaughter walked into my life wearing a pendant that Elena had kept safe for almost 30 years. He told the whole story: their college romance, Elena's disappearance, the pendant that led him to Lisa, the discovery that they were father and daughter. There wasn't a dry eye in the room when he finished. "Elena couldn't be here tonight," David continued, "but her love is here in every one of us. In Lisa's strength, in Sophie's joy, and Victoria's generous heart, and in my second chance to be the father I should have been from the beginning." Later that night, after all the guests had gone home and Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch, the three adults sat on the balcony looking out at the city lights. "I have an announcement," Lisa said. "I got accepted to the nursing program at the university. I start in the fall." Victoria squealed and hugged her. "Lisa, that's amazing. You're going to be such a wonderful nurse." "I couldn't do it without you," Lisa said. "Without both of you. For the first time in my life, I don't have to choose between my dreams and taking care of Sophie." David reached over and squeezed her hand. "Elena would be so proud." "I think about her every day," Lisa said, touching the pendant. "I used to think this necklace was just a pretty piece of jewelry she left me, but now I understand it was her way of making sure love would always find its way back to where it belongs." Victoria looked at her father and her sister, her real sister in every way that mattered, and felt a peace she'd never experienced before. "Do you think we'll always be this happy?" Happy isn't something you achieve once and keep forever, David said. It's something you choose every day. But I choose it with both of you, for as long as you'll have me. Sophie stirred on the couch and mumbled something in her sleep. Victoria got up to cover her with a blanket, and Lisa watched her new sister tuck Sophie in with gentle hands. You know what the best part is? Lisa said to David. Sophie gets to grow up knowing she's loved by so many people. She'll never have to wonder if she belongs or if she's wanted. Helena made sure of that. David nodded, thinking about all the years he'd missed, all the moments he couldn't get back. But he also thought about all the tomorrows stretching ahead of them. Birthday parties and bedtime stories, graduations, and family dinners, arguments and reconciliations, and all the beautiful messiness of being a family. The pendant caught the light from the city below, sparkling like it held all the love and hope Elena had poured into it years ago. It had done its job, bringing them together across time and circumstance. Now it could rest easy, knowing that the love it represented would live on in the family Elena's sacrifice had made possible. In the end, the pendant hadn't just reunited a father and daughter. It had created something entirely new. A family built on choice rather than obligation, on love rather than duty, on the belief that it's never too late to come home.